Hey guys, it's me, Jody Hand, Mrs. Hand Painted, and I just wanted to share with you a quick little tutorial today. This is a really quick painting, kind of like a watercolor sketch that I did in my handmade sketchbook today. And this is a sketchbook that I made with some Fabriano Artistico 100% cotton watercolor paper, and I used a coptic stitch to bind that together in some chipboard covers that I covered with my own fabric. So I'm using my Daniel Smith watercolors and a Princeton Neptune round 8, just that brush for the entire painting. And then I've got my super messy porcelain plate here I'm using for my palette that I'm just going to use that green zone here. And I'm just going to mix up a few shades of green on my plate. I've got a deep sap green, just the regular sap green, and then the undersea green. And then I'll also be using the transparent brown oxide to do my cattails. So I'm just going to do some different layers of grasses here first. I'm just going to mix up some of those greens first. Just get those and I'll just kind of blend it all together just to give myself some variation here in the greens. So whatever greens you have that you really like, I like to do more of the yellowish and brownish greens. So what I'm doing here is just with very light pressure, even though I'm using a very large brush, it has a nice fine tip. So I'm just doing some really light pressure and taking different shades of that green and then just making some big long grass blades and kind of vary the direction of them. And I want to focus taller blades on the left-hand side to kind of make my composition here, where they're actually going to come down at an angle, kind of cutting that paper in half on the diagonal. So just keeping that in mind of where I want to put my grass blades. And every so often you can add one that's kind of bent over. And how I'm doing that is just going up, very thin, quick stroke, and then applying a little more pressure as I do a sideways stroke. So if you want to practice that on a little scratch paper first before doing that, I mean, this is very loose style composition, so it really gives you a lot of uh, wiggle room on that. If you just want to do lots of quick strokes and just vary up your shades of green, you can mix a little brown or some yellow in there just to vary it up. And then eventually we're going to be kind of muddling it all up when I go to add in my fuzzy background after the fact. And if you don't prefer to do that, you want to do it beforehand, go ahead and do your background first and then let that dry and go over top with your grasses. But I just wanted to do a really, really loose kind of wet composition here and just get some paint slapped down on my paper basically. So here I've got a bunch of grass in there and I want to add in those brown cattails. So I'm taking some transparent brown oxide and I'll mix a little bit of that up on my palette plate here. Just add a little bit more water to it and kind of, I kind of scraped off, I guess, in a way, or kind of got some of the extra water off my brush there on the edge of my plate. So I'm making a very thin, with that very tip point, that sharp point of that brush, making a tiny little line, and then I'm applying more pressure as I go down and make that elongated oval shape. And then I'm just using that brown to make the stems or the stalks of those cattails. So I'm just going to add in some more of that brown. You can mix that brown with the green and make up some more brown green colors. Just kind of wherever you have a nice little gap in your grasses, or you could have it tucked in there in the middle. Just add a few little cattails here and there and put them at different levels of height. So I'm kind of just following along my diagonal there of where the grasses would go. I'm just going to mix some of that brown and green together to give me a little bit darker in the grasses, and I'll fill in some more here. And just doing really light strokes, going back and forth. If you want thicker blades of grass, you apply more pressure with your brush. If you want the thin strokes, you just do a really light pressure. And just wherever you feel like adding another little cattail, you can add one in there. I got my brown grass blade got a little wide there, so I just made that a happy accident and became a new cattail in that spot. All right, so to do the background, I'm not too worried about using the clean water here. I just kind of went in my water that was already had the green paint in it. And I'm just adding some water across just very loosely, just kind of dabbing it in between some of the areas of the of the grasses, and I don't mind if it all kind of bleeds together. Most of that is pretty dry, so it's not really bleeding around a whole lot. A little bit of the brown is, but I'm going to take a little bit. I think I want to use this indigo because that Daniel Smith's indigo is actually an indanthrone blue mixed with the black, so it's just a really, really dark navy blue in actuality. So just putting some of that in there, and that'll kind of represent like the watery area behind the cattails. It's just a very fuzzy background. I can just kind of fill that in, and then I'm gonna use some green more up at the top, and that'll kind of be like maybe a shoreline off in the distance that you can't really see, like a nice foggy morning. Just really just blending all of that together. And if you end up getting too much water on your brush like I did there, I just kind of dab that off on my towel. I just keep an old towel instead of using 100 paper towels because I was just going through them. But I have this old baker's towel that is terrible for washing dishes and drying dishes off with, so it just became my painting towel. So if it gets really bad and dirty, I just kind of fold it over in a different direction. And here I'm just kind of letting that water move the paint around and just pushing the color around with my brush. And I'm pretty satisfied with how that worked. And if you end up with any really white areas, you can just kind of blend a little bit of water and a little bit, just a tiny little bit of your pigment in there and just kind of blend that together. And since I wasn't using a block or anything, my paper did kind of curl up. It's kind of hard to see from the top view, but I'm just using my heat tool to dry that, and it kind of flattens the paper back out. So didn't get it too soaked. And that's what's nice about using that cotton paper as well. If you're using a less expensive paper that's the alpha cellulose based, you're not going to get the same absorption properties that you will by using cotton paper. So if you are just starting out, I highly recommend checking out some 100% cotton options. At a minimum, finding something that has at least 25% cotton if you are looking for economical savings. But I really like that Fabriano paper, and there are some test packs available you can get from different art stores online as well. So I hope you had fun painting along with me, and if you made one of these projects, I'd love for you to share it with me. You can tag me on Instagram, Mrs. Hand Painted.